Wait, this is not just another video. You did not end up here by accident. Do you know who is the most dangerous person in the room? The one who has already understood everything, yet remains silent, letting you continue speaking. Have you ever looked into the eyes of a liar, knowing the truth, yet pretending to believe, just to see how far they would go with their well-rehearsed deceit? That is not naivety. It is strategy. It is spiritual chess. Chosen one, you have been 10 steps ahead all along. Here is an interesting fact. According to psychological research, over 90% of information is communicated not through words, but through energy and behavior. People think they can hide their secrets in speech, yet their energy has already betrayed them. And you have always sensed these invisible confessions. They thought you were slow. They thought they were smarter. But the truth is, you were a spiritual sniper, silent, precise, observant. You were recording everything in spirit, while appearing to notice nothing. And now they are in panic. They cannot understand how you connected dots they believed no one could see. But you never needed proof. You never needed to ask questions. Because your gift, your whisper sight, was spiritual discernment. Your intuition, yes, it is a compass. And divine revelation, your superpower. This is not just a story about exposing deceit. It goes much deeper. It is spiritual surveillance. While they tried to manipulate you, you were reading them, tracking their patterns, catching shifts in their energy, noticing the nuances of their lies. And now they're not just shocked. They are afraid, because they no longer know how much you knew, when you knew it, and most of all, what you intend to do with it. You never avoided questions because you were indifferent, but because you were studying not the story, but the motive. You did not need the details. You looked deeper into the essence. You noticed when people spoke in ways that did not match what they felt. You listened not to the words, but to the pauses, to the stumbles, to the way their eyes darted when truth came too close. People can lie with their tongues, but their energy never lies. You knew this from the very beginning. That is why you let them speak, why you let them feel confident. You pretended to have no suspicions, when in fact you were gathering information quietly, patiently, strategically. Every time they thought they had fooled you, you simply made another invisible note in spirit. They thought your silence was ignorance, but it was the stillness of an observer. You let them tell their stories because you wanted to see how far they would go. You saw the lie the moment it left their lips, but you did not react. Not because you missed it, but because you wanted to see the limits they would dare to reach. You studied the depth of their falsehood. You were not aiming to catch them in the act. You wanted to see how deeply the betrayal had rooted itself. While they thought you were trusting, you simply kept your peace. Your upbringing taught you to read between the lines. You grew up among manipulators, learning to detect lies in a glance, in a vibration, in subtle contradictions. When the truth finally surfaced, they could not believe you had known all along. But that is what wounds them the most. Not that you knew, but that you allowed them to continue without saying a word. And when everything came to light, you did not accuse. You did not raise your voice. You simply stepped aside. And from that moment, they began to destroy themselves. Their own actions became their trap, and you merely watched them walk into it step by step. They never realized that you were eavesdropping in spirit, while they whispered behind your back, made plans, spoke freely, believing you would not hear. Your spirit already knew. They forgot one thing. You do not live only in the physical world. You hear in the spirit. You feel the air shift when your name is spoken in secret. You sense when a room grows heavy with lies. You are not guessing. It was not mere intuition. It was divine knowledge. God revealed details to you in dreams, in sensations, in sudden flashes of insight. Your spirit reacted before your mind could even comprehend. You stepped back from people not because you had proof, but because you already knew the truth. And now it is obvious, because you began to distance yourself long before they confessed anything. You changed your behavior before they even realized you had understood. They were frightened by exactly that. You did not hear it physically, but you felt it. They hoped you would not notice if they remained silent in your presence. But your spirit was in rooms their thoughts could never reach. And now they ask themselves, what else does he know? They recall every meeting, every phrase, every expression. You did not need to eavesdrop. The truth came to you through a spiritual channel they had no access to. They wanted to control, to hide, to manipulate. But you do not play the same game, because you do not just hear. You see not with your eyes, but with your heart, your spirit, your inner sight. And do you know what else was their downfall? Your calm. They mistook it for weakness. They thought, if he is silent, he must have understood nothing. But it was a trap. Every step they took, you had already calculated. They were used to chaos, to a truth that must be loud. But you did not make noise. You simply waited calmly, patiently. Every word, every gesture, every hesitation, you recorded. You already knew what to do, and you knew when to do it. And when the time came, you did not shout. You left, without noise, without scandal. And your silence became louder than any revelation. They could not understand how you were so precise. Your insight did not merely expose their lies. It destroyed the entire image they had been building for years. You did not just catch the details. You saw their essence. You broke through the mask, the game, the facade. Your knowing did not wound them on the surface. It struck at the foundation of their false identity. They had not merely lied, they had become the lie. They lived in illusion, playing a role to survive, impress, manipulate. And you, quietly, effortlessly, exposed it all. And it was this clarity that terrified them. Because now they know, if you saw it, who else might? Your truth did not merely reveal a fact. It dismantled a system. They could no longer wear a mask around you. They could not be false, feeling you see through them. You did not try to destroy them, nor did you plan to expose them publicly. But your very presence was already light, and light does not allow lies to live. Your precision is a threat, not because it is cruel, but because it is flawless. And now they are forced not just to justify themselves, but to rebuild their identity from scratch. For what it stood upon turned out to be emptiness. They thought you needed proof, screenshots, recordings, witnesses, but they did not know that you yourself were the proof. The moment you stopped responding, the moment you stepped away, the moment you stopped investing, that became the proof. You did not argue, explain, or fight. You simply trusted what you already knew in spirit. You needed no confirmation from outside. You were the confirmation. The way your energy changed, the way you fell silent, the way you no longer played in their theater, that was the answer. Your silence became louder than any revelation. You did not shout. You became the witness. Not a reaction, but the very fact of your withdrawal. And now they are in panic, not because you exposed them, but because you could have and chose not to. Because it is exactly this, your conscious silence, your restraint, your distance, that hurts more than any words. They live now not with guilt, but with fear, because they do not know how much more you saw, what else you understood, and whether you will ever speak of it. They confessed without even realizing it. While they try to hold the mask, you were reading their subconscious. While they said one thing, their body, their gaze, their pauses, their gestures were saying something entirely different. You did not listen only to their words. You caught the contradictions between what they said and how they said it. You noticed the tremor in their voice, the tension in their jaw, the sudden change of subject. You saw their eyes dart, their evasions from direct answers, their laughter that lasted just a little too long. You saw it all, without shouting, without pressure, without exposure. Only within, I know. They did not realize every movement betrayed the truth, that you had long decoded their language. You were not waiting for a confession. You had already read everything from their energy. And now, when you are near, they feel exposed, even if you are silent, because you never believe their words. You always read their soul. You let them think they were deceiving you. Why? Because you needed to wait for the final move. You could have exposed everything from the very beginning, but you waited. Not because you did not see, but because you knew. People reveal themselves more fully when they believe they are winning. They relax, become careless, begin to show their true nature. You did not interrupt the performance. You let it reach the final act. Because it is in the final act that everything becomes clear. And when they made their last move, thinking it would break you, you saw everything. Not only what they did, but why they did it. Their mask did not fall. They removed it themselves, convinced you had understood nothing. And you simply watched in silence until the end. Because you wanted to understand not only their actions, but the deeper motive. And when it revealed itself, you left. Calmly, coldly, forever. Your insight was not logical, it was ancestral. It was not just a sixth sense, it was the call of blood, a warning from the depths of generations. You did not merely feel, you remembered. Your body reacted to lies because in your line, there were those who had already walked through the same fire. This was not guessing, not fear. It was intuitive memory. When your chest tightened, it was your ancestors speaking. When you felt unease next to someone without knowing why, it was the voice of the spirit woven into your DNA. You were not analyzing, you were remembering. You were not imagining, you knew. And that is why no one could understand how you knew. They did not know you were connected to a system to which they had no access. This was not merely intuition, it was spiritual technology. And you were the carrier, the one who hears between the lines, sees through masks, and feels what is hidden. They built their entire strategy on your supposed blindness. Their plan worked only if you noticed nothing. Every lie, every manipulation, every action was built on the belief that you were trusting, that you would not suspect, that you would not ask unnecessary questions. They mistook your silence for ignorance, and your softness for weakness. But the whole performance could last only until you began to step away. And now, with just one step back, their entire structure has begun to crumble. They were not prepared for the fact that you had known all along. You did not speak. You did not warn. You simply watched, allowing them to continue to reveal themselves. And when the moment came, you did not accuse. You simply left. You changed your behavior. You stopped investing. You removed your presence. And that alone was enough for their illusion to start collapsing. Now the masks are falling on their own. The people they try to deceive are beginning to see as well. Because truth, like fire, spreads. And when you stop playing, the lie begins to fall apart without your participation. They can no longer restore what has been destroyed. Because their empire stood on deception, and it could not survive the touch of truth. You did not fight, you simply saw. And that was enough. Your truth was so precise that they thought. Someone told you. They could not believe you had found it out yourself. Too precise, too specific, too on target. They wondered who told him. Where did he learn it? They searched for traitors among their own. They convinced themselves that you had received the information from the outside, because they could not understand. You knew it not because you sought it, but because truth itself found you. You did not need rumors. You did not eavesdrop. You simply felt. God showed you suddenly, through a dream, through a whisper in the spirit, through an inner alarm impossible to explain, yet impossible to ignore. They forgot. You walk with God. The one who walks in truth is always a step ahead of the one who walks in lies. You did not make a scene, not because you did not feel the pain, but because at the very moment they betrayed you, you had already begun planning your exit. Every word, every change in tone, every flicker of insincerity was not just disappointment. It was data. While they thought you were tangled, still holding on, you were already saying goodbye. Quietly, step by step. No drama, no demands, just colder, more reserved. While they grew bolder, you were leaving, first in spirit, then in soul, and finally in body. They never expected to lose you in silence, for the door to close without a slam, but with an echo that would never let them rest. You did not just leave. You left clean. No scandal, no accusation of hysteria. You left them only silence. And now that silence roars in their memory, louder than any words. They thought you were the object, But you were the judge. They believed they were testing your loyalty, your naivety, your softness. They thought they controlled you, that you reacted on command, that they set the rules. But all this time, you were watching them, not with resentment, but with clarity. They thought it was an experiment. You were building a case. Every test, every pressure, every provocation became an exhibit. You did not take it personally. You analyzed. You waited, not for an outburst, but for the picture to be complete. You watched who they became when they thought they had won. And when it all became clear, you did not accuse. You did not beg for love. You did not prove your worth. You passed judgment. Silent. Final. You did not destroy them. You simply refused to play. And that destroyed them, because it all depended on your presence, your energy. When you left, it collapsed. They thought you were a pawn. They faced a master. Quiet, precise, spiritually armed. They underestimated you, because you were calm, because you did not attack. But every moment of your silence was a move, strategic, deliberate. You were not lost. You were gathering facts, not weak, observing. While they played a role, you saw the essence. And now they are restless, wondering what you know, when you knew it. And worst of all, what you have not yet said. Because truth does not just wound. It leaves a mark. And you did not only uncover the lie, you exposed the system that held it. You did not destroy them. You came with truth. And truth always destroys. Everything built on falsehood